theology one over the other, our religion over Christianity, our understanding over Buddhism. He says this is how we understand, meaning it's our Torah. Our Torah is an understanding, so to speak, of how God tells us that He wishes to limit Himself. He wants to be understood in this way. That's the beginning and the end. There's a lot in the middle of understanding what is God. You know, there's a lot. There's a lot in the middle, but it's the idea that that's what Torah is. That there's a part of Torah that even though God is bigger, maybe, than Torah in theory, but He decided to make Himself as big as it's like to limit Himself. It's called Hagbala Atzmis. He self-limited Himself. This is who He's going to be. He's not going to become revealed in one person and worship through that one person. Why not? Because He decided that He wasn't going to. How do we know that?
Wow.
Through the Torah. Okay? Now, you can argue with that. That's why there are other religions.
And the Tanya takes it further. It's actually in the Otiyot themselves. The words of the Torah. It's where the Shekhinah.
That what?
Where God's presence most lies.
So getting back to this idea of the Shekhinah. So everything we're saying now is based on this premise. To answer any questions that you have, you're right. But getting back to the Shekhinah. So the whole concept of God that we can talk about is what God tells us about Himself, presumably what we believe. That's a belief. But the power of it is that it's so that we can be in a relationship. And here's the key issue of what it is to be in a relationship with God, according to the Zohar. Not making God too big so that you can't relate to Him, but not making God too small so that He's just another idol that you do with as you please. And that's what the Zohar... So to do that, there's a teaching about do not covet. It says, don't covet the... What shouldn't you covet? What the Torah says not to covet what? Give me some of the things. Your friend's wife, what else? His house, his ox, his donkey. And what else? It says one other thing. It's not a specific thing. V'chol asher l'reacha. And all that is to your brother.
So why you have to specify?
So
the code includes everything.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's one little like drush, a nice little vart, a nice little teaching that says, why do you covet something? Because you see, oh, this guy is so lucky. His wife is so beautiful. Or this guy, wow, what a magnificent house. You see that specific thing, and you say, like, why does he deserve it and not me? But the Torah is telling you, V'chol asher l'reacha. You're looking at one aspect of the person. You're not seeing the whole. If you saw the entirety of a person, you don't covet. They are who they are, you are, you are. You only covet because you're seeing a part. And the same thing when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how much more so we're created in the Tselem Elokim, the image of God. When it comes to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we need to have not just a picture of a part of God. We need to have the picture of the whole. Now, God is so big we can't begin to... Exactly. So that's why He gives us the mitzvos, which are the Evarim, the Malka. The Zohar repeatedly refers to it in this week's Parsha as the limbs of the body of the king. As Rabbi Noah was talking to us about before, this idea of the limbs of God. What does that mean? Most people understand it as a metaphor. And the mitzvot are a metaphor. You learn from Tanya, but it's the Zohar really, based on the Zohar, that each one of the mitzvot is a particular limb, part of the body of God, the divine idea of God's relationship with us. We're relating to him, and again, it's not a physical thing, but again, now the power of the offerings is that there was this visceral. When you brought an offering, there was a living, breathing being, not that different from us, that was killed. You know what the Zohar says? The Zohar says that what we're doing is we're killing our own body. That's what the Zohar says. You know Jekyll and Hyde? The whatever it's called, the adventure of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The idea of Jekyll and Hyde, Christian, Judeo-Christian, whatever that means, idea, right? Of this person who figures out a way to separate the two aspects of himself, what we call the animal soul, right, and the divine soul. So the Zohar says something very interesting. The Zohar says what happened is we used to have them united. They were more united. And then when we sinned, that's why we couldn't eat an animal. An animal represented an animal. We weren't the animal. But then we sinned and sinned and sinned till the flood. And then Noah and the descendants of Noah were able to eat meat. So the Zohar explains what happened is we became Jekyll and Hyde. The animal, why did we need the animal? Because we were an animal. So we needed to, we became like an animal.
Yeah.
So therefore we needed to eat the animal because just like there's a food chain, you know, one animal eats another animal.
Yeah.
We became part of that. But it's because we're an animal that we're eating the other animals. This is what the Zohar says. So he says that's why the kapara is a carbon of an animal. Maybe, I don't know what Rav Kook, everybody says that you're going to tell me, straighten me out for once. I know they say that Rav Kook says that when the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, Meher V'Yameinu, that we'll have the menachos, we'll have the meal offerings. Lav Dafka, even though it seems to contradict the Rambam. The Rambam paradoxically is the one who, on the one hand, says that the whole idea of the sacrifice is a shortcoming based on our lack of, able to connect in a more pure form. On the other hand, he still says every mitzvah is coming back, including on a simple level, including the kabbanot. So they say that Rav Kook says this. I never saw it, just heard it. What does he actually say?
Yeah, he did write that.
So what is he?
The mincha will be there because it's vegetable, but not the animal sacrifice.
Okay, he's
but
good.
there could be different phases. Maybe there's an earlier phase when there were animal sacrifices, and then at a later phase we graduate to a more rarefied spiritual existence of the mincha.
Mm-hmm. So it could be, by the way, that this Zohar that I'm quoting could kind of also be a way of helping us understand. This is the Ramchal, the Gilgal of Ramchal, at least in his hair. So it could be that according to the Zohar as well, since the idea of having a physical animal is because of the Chet, because of all the sins that led to us being permitted to eat animals because we became more animalistic, that once we get beyond that state, we may not, at least theoretically, have to bring. Again, this is a big debate because some people don't. Anytime you say change in the Torah, no, we don't want to hear change. So, but let Mashiach.
It's an evolution.
Let Mashiach figure that one out. Let Eliyahu and Navi figure that out, which is also prominently featured. So let's get back on track here. So we've got the sanctuary, the Mishkan, the Mikdash. They're slightly different, but we're going to use the same terminology. And we have the Mizbeach, we have the altar. We have different types of offerings. And what they have in common is that if they're animal offerings, let's see what the animals are. There's an ox, there's a bird, right? So what did you have? There was a fire that descended, according to the sages. The fire looked like a lion, and then you were bringing it. So right away, the Zohar says, you have the 4 parts of the chariot that are represented in these offerings.
Nice.
You have the face of the man, you have the face of the eagle, even though these turtle doves didn't look much like eagles, but okay, they're the same idea. You have the face of the ox, and then you have the, what were we missing?
Lion.
The lion and the thing. So the idea is each one of these offerings is bringing together some form of unification between different aspects of God. Again, the main one is the Holy One, blessed be the Shekhinah. But the truth is, there's 2 types of yichud. There's a lot of different yichudim, a lot of different unifications. So one of the other unifications that we're going to talk about is the unification between the father and the mother. The father and the mother is a reference to Chachma and Bina, to wisdom and understanding. That even though they have a consistent yichud, a yichud tamidi it's called, meaning they're consistently together, like when a couple is married, they're together, they're married. But on the other hand, even the father and mother can come into a closer level of unity, a more inner unity. And what we're going to be looking at is you have this idea of the ola, which is totally consumed, other than the skin, by the altar. It wasn't given to the Kohen and didn't get a portion in it. The chatas was a sin offering if somebody unintentionally did certain things, not everything. That was consumed by the altar and by the Kohen. And the asham, which is a questionable misdeed, meaning the person may or may not have, let's say, eaten the chaylev, a certain food that's not kosher. So if they may or may not have, so then they bring this asham. There's some other offerings, but these are the main offerings that a person brings out of a sense of obligation, of a tikkun, of fixing something. The ola is more for like a person wants to get closer to God. So let's say he didn't do a mitzvah. If you don't do a mitzvah taseh, there's nothing you can do. You missed out. But you could bring an ola as like a gift. Or if you had improper thoughts, you can bring an ola. Ola is misak, even thoughts of idolatry. So each one of these things represent a different aspect, a different yichud that's taking place between you and yourself, really. The different aspects of yourself and the Rebbeinu Shalom and the Master. So let's look inside the Zohar. It's Parshas Tzav.